Peter, please try follow the link in the chat. We are in this one. Yeah, history issues.
Hi, Christian.
I've switched off the other thing that was grabbing my microphone. Do I sound better now?
Good.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, if anyone wants to speak, just please unmute yourselves and speak. Behaves a bit different from WebEx, but I think you should all be familiar with this. The list is a bit confusing. Is Carsten here already? Funny thing is, he is kind of actively editing the CodeMD, which, by the way, should be a good pointer to paste in here in the chat again. It's already in the topic, but just to be sure. So please take note of your presence in the linked CodeMD, as we always do with the blue sheets. Speaking of which, this is an IETF meeting, so please be aware of the rules by which we do this, which includes IPR, but also being nice to each other. Given that you're all regulars, I won't go into any further details. And with that, jump to the agenda for today, for this CBOR meeting. Oh. Carsten will be joining us momentarily, given that he's copy-pasting the thing from the CodeMD. So I'll just start going through the agenda. There are a few five document topics have been put in for today. The tax OID, just for brief status update, Cdl Control, and packed CBOR for the given that Brandon sent a review. The maps discussion is ongoing on the mailing list, but we might kind of, if there are currently open points, we might want to chat a bit about those.
Like it.
CBOR's use in other working groups is seeing a bit of a block in with Yang CBOR. Maybe Carsten can say a few words there, but things look like they can progress with the pull requests that are open. And finally, there's been a big topic of CBOR being used by other organizations. In this case, for antivirus, the physical one, with the European Union digital green certificates for COVID vaccinations. And I'll just hand out a few pointers and maybe we can have a bit of a chat on kind of what that means for general adoption. Any other topics you'd like to add? Just so we know ahead of time when we're running out of it. Given that nobody has their microphones open, I would appreciate an occasional yes, nod, or I can still hear you, because it's kind of all on. Okay. Okay, so let's get started with the very easy part. The tax OID is in the RFC editor queue. So as I understand, it's just waiting for the RFC editors to kind of pick it up and acknowledge that things are going on there. And I don't know of much further action that's needed on our part here. Anything more to say here? Good point. Thank you. The next topic is a bit of a trickier one. That's the status of Cdl control. So I've started a working group last call on this 2 weeks ago, but made a point of uh, stating clearly there that we will need a bit more feedback. So Carsten has been quite responsive on the general topic and even provided a few notes by himself. But my Shepherd write-up will be hard to process further if we don't get any reviews on the document as it before it's leaving the working group.
Hear you.
So I know that Henk is in a conflicting meeting, but especially Carsten, if you have anyone still whom you can still ask for further input, or of the others in the group, if you see any way of reviewing this, please do so, because otherwise this will get a bit stuck. Doesn't necessarily need to be one of the regulars here. So, for example, from ASDF, if people there can provide a review, that would be just as well be helpful.
Yeah, only I just want to mention this so people know that they really can now use this in other documents without any danger of them getting held up.
Me? Yes.
Yeah, and just to add to what Christian said, I expect that the IESG will ask questions about it, if like this is not necessarily blocking at the working group level, but it will be blocking at IESG evaluation level.
Yeah, so who in this room has actually read it? Okay, but you will be the shepherd, so you don't speak out. I mean, a shepherd review is a valuable review, but shouldn't just be the author and the shepherd. Yeah, of course, you have to be in a position where you actually need something like ABNF to actually read this thing, and maybe the people here aren't in that position right now.
So Christian mentioned that some people had promised review. There was Hank and who else?
Ira at least supported the document for adoption, so that's kind of a soft indication that he might be interested.
If a couple of people from ASDF would read it and provide feedback, that would be very valuable.
Right.
So on the procedural side, I'd just keep the working group last call open and extend that a bit for now. But Carsten, if you could kind of nudge a few people, that might help get this all on.
Yeah, so we could all congratulate Hank to his birthday tomorrow and ask him where that review is.
We've all put together to present you with a document to read. Yep.
So the document really has 3 parts, and if a few people review just one part of it, then we could be done quickly as well. I mean, it's a short document to begin with.
By the way, I've forgotten to ask about this, but I'm kind of, given that today I'm alone in the chairing role, if someone could help out with taking a few notes of kind of things like this can be done in parts 2, that will be helpful, because otherwise I'll have to switch around a lot between talking and typing, and this would slow things down. Okay, so chopping it up for reviewing is definitely a helpful. Should make it easier to come by reviews. So let's nudge people more and see how this goes. Next item on the list is a review of CBOR pack that just came in. I've only had a brief look so far, so I think that this is mostly I'm not sure whether this needs much discussion or can just be factored into the next iteration. Does sound like there is a preferred JSON way of doing multi-maps, so that could help us here, especially given that the last iterations direction was more in the sense that, yeah, let's now that the data model is kind of figured out, let's try not to overdo any compression parts, which doing anything different than the proposed multi-map solution with kind of having one key and then a list of values would be. So maybe that's all there is to it. Anything to add?
So you're talking about the maps discussion right now, not about Brendan's review of PACT.
I'm
confused where we are.
Yes, so am I, because I just think, apologies. Yes, I've kind of sorry, I completely mixed those things up. Sorry, Brandon's review was on the use of nested. Yeah, let's stick with the maps, because that's what I've been talking about, just using the wrong labels. So I'll just switch those around. But yes, that was, so the last point on the maps was there seems to be a JSON way of doing things, and there is not too much pressure for compression. So probably that's a good direction for the current iteration of the document. For the document, as we could finish it in this working group and revisit when there comes more need for super complex expressions.
This is Emil here. Can I say something about that?
Sure, please go ahead.
Right. So, like you said, I think it would be worth surveying what JSON is doing for multi-maps, and it might be worthwhile mimicking what the consensus is. The goal is to make it easier to transcode between CBOR and JSON, so that the transcoder doesn't have to memorize the entire map structure to reshuffle it in a different format to convert between CBOR and JSON. So I'd like more time to, unless someone else wants to take that on, to kind of survey what's going on in the JSON world, and also take some time to analyze what how difficult it would be to decode and encode the various compression schemes that Karsten proposed. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. So the question that's that we need to answer is that something we want to complete before we finish the maps thing, or can we do the maps thing now and add the various compact forms later? I'm not entirely sure about that.
Well,
go ahead.
If we are to mimic what Jason is doing, it would be better to do something similar to the M-list compression. So that can't be. I don't think that could be changed later. It would have to be decided beforehand.
Right. So you're talking about replacing what's in there, which is essentially an uncompressed form by one of the compact forms.
Yes. For the multi-maps case.
Yes.
So if we leave the document as is right now, it assumes that multi-maps, the keys are repeated. And if we later change, we can't add the M list without breaking backward compatibility with what the document currently is. I don't know if I'm making sense here.
Yeah, we would need to add tags for that.
Oh, so you're suggesting tags for the compressed cases?
Well, that certainly would be one way of handling it. I'm not saying that that's the way we should be handling it, but that sounds like the obvious way of not getting into the situation where we have to decide.
Yeah, I understand.
So of the 10 different packing schemes that was in my last year's mail, we certainly don't want to have all 10, but also just focusing on one may not be the right thing. So maybe in the end we turn up with 2 or maybe even 3.
Oh.
So the implication there would be that applications are not by default compatible across them, but it should be relatively straightforward to convert between one and the other, so that you can get the data from one application to the other.
Yeah, so maybe we should just try to generate some pseudocode for how to convert between the various packing forms.
Yes.
So
we could list enumerate the parse events that occur when we receive these structures to see if there's any memorization or weird stuff that has to happen. I don't know if that's what you mean by pseudocode.
Yeah. I mean, this is not meant for people to write their code from, but to understand what is actually the complexity of doing this. So parse events is certainly one way of saying that.
Okay, perhaps like unless someone else wants to take it on, that could be something I look at after, in addition to the survey of what JavaScript does.
Sounds good to me.
Because I'm almost at the point of implementing that in my library, so I need to do that analysis anyway.
That's great.
And with
Okay.
that knowledge, and we'll have a better base to understand where to go further with the different.
You're very quiet at the moment.
Sorry. With that information, we'll then have a better base of deciding where to go forward.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So should we talk about that again in 2 weeks?
Sounds good to me.
Great.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yes, let's do that. Okay. With that, on to Brandon's review on the topic of tact. Now, really, one point he raises is the topic of whether what does it mean to have nested decompressions. And Carsten, I see that you just posted an answer, so can you just say a few words there?
Well, first of all, I think we have a pretty good common understanding now that the table population mechanism needs to allow some hierarchy. So the table population may come from various places and needs to be merged before you can do the unpacking. So I think that's consensus, and I think that consensus is already reflected in the current draft, although one can always check whether maybe some more text is needed. Now, Brendan's main comment was that we should have a way to say where additional table content is coming from. And he just said there should be an identifier. Now, of course, there are tons of different kinds of identifiers. And I just wrote a quick response with 4 of those. So these identifiers have the usual identifying data problem, the URI hash context IANA registry thing. And also, we are probably better off if we have a common data structure for these table pre-populations. So similar to how we have tag 51 for setting up a table population on the fly, we would probably want to have a canned table population. So something that does not carry actual CBOR that then can be unpacked. So this also could be under tag 51, or it could be a different tag. We can decide that. What we probably should decide on how this looks like, so people can put this on their web servers and know what the hash input should be for the hash case and so on. So I think that's the obvious next step. And then the question is, how many of those variants do we actually want to specifically support? So the IANA registry, we already have an IANA registry, which is the tags registry. So here we would essentially say how the specification that is referenced from the tags registry would indicate what the content of that pre-population is. So I think that that's pretty obvious once we have defined that canned table. And the same thing is true for the hash case, and probably also for the NI URI case. I'm not quite as comfortable with something like HTTPS because there's a little bit of an invitation to actually change what is at this HTTPS URI. And yeah, but in any case, if we ignore that aspect, we can simply say that under the HTTPS UI, there could again be just a canned table population in the same structure that we have everywhere else. So I think that would be a nice round set of alternatives. Maybe a few too many alternatives because it's not quite clear when you use NI and when you use the naked hash. But yeah, we can massage this a little bit later.
This sounds quite a lot like the discussion that we are having over in the board on the topic of where do Coral dictionaries come from, which may or may not be be later implemented in terms of these. So maybe we can kind of converge on a common pattern here, no matter whether it's then implemented using the same means or not. Because also the URI thing could have the implied difficulty of compatible change control. So if there is a URI and people change it, there are changes that are just extensions that would be okay, and changes that are more. So that's something to consider too. Provided that the way of importing the number of the entities from the URI is somehow limited by something in the importer. So you would say that from that URI we import 20 the 20 values that are there, and if there's 21 there, then that would be ignored. Something like this might even provide a bit of evolvability.
Yeah, so one way forward would be to write text about what we just discussed in the next version of the CBOR pack document, and then discuss this in the Coral design team. And then when we have some feedback from the Coral design team, maybe we can discuss it again here in 2 weeks.
Sounds like a good plan to me. Which also means that I'll try to follow up on this on the mailing list with a summary of that, and if it's only pointing to the notes here.
Sure.
Okay then. Next item. That would be the state of CBOR use in other working groups, with Yang CBOR being blocked currently. Carsten, you put this on the list.
Yeah, I just wanted to use this and the next item a little bit as a reminder that as a working group, we not only need to focus on getting the CBOR part right, but we need to think about the integration of CBOR in various contexts. And so, for instance, one thing we stumble about each time, I mean, it never has run smoothly, is getting the media types defined. And that has happened here again. Maybe the choice that we made in the core working group wasn't wasn't too bright, having a single media type with a parameter that can take two values, which simply wasn't correctly reflected in the formal parts of the IANA registration, and we should start to get this right. But maybe we can at some point create a little bit of manual for people how to get their media types defined for CBOR data in a way that this actually is acceptable to designated experts and to the ISG.
But for the Yang CBOR document itself, it seems to be going in kind of going on with the fixes that you proposed, right?
I think so. I think we have one minor detail open in the pull request that is referenced in the notes, and I just need to find time to actually fill that thing in. But I think we have we now understand the main aspect of it. It's a bit. There's another problem there, which is that if you do an IANA registration in one document as a way of planning ahead for another document, which happens here with Yang CBOR and SID, does that create a normative reference from the planning ahead document to the document that then actually uses the registration? And I think that's something we need to discuss with the normative reference aficionados, because that problem, I think, has occurred in other places, and it requires a little bit of thinking about the purpose of having registries and so on, to understand that allocating points in a registry is not necessarily creating a normative reference for the base document. So that is going to bite us next if we don't get this right.
Okay. But I would suggest that the further discussion on how we as the CBOR group can help other document authors be postponed after the digital green certificates part, because that topic comes up there again.
Yes.
So digital green certificates. When last I got tested, I got one of these nice QR codes, and turned out when reading it that this is zlib compressed CBOR. So that's another use case. That's a real world and widely deployed use case for CBOR. What they are putting in the certificates in detail is they put in there is a COSI in there. So it's in particular it's a COSI sign 1 structure that contains a few header data items, and then a plain text that basically describes who got tested, when, valid for how long, by whom, and the person that is tested is described with a few properties that can be then valid, kind of be changed with a physical ID, and then there's a signature of that with one of the keys that are identified by key ID and kept currently by kind of some people that are currently doing this, their secretariat, and they do have plans for kind of evolving the key distribution for all of this, but right now they have to ship it in 14 days from now. So, so yeah, this is all a bit of a kind of fast thing. But kind of to my personal surprise, they seem to get quite a bit of that right. I mean, it kind of looks like a good application for CBOR and COSI. Also, a few odd things, like there is setlib compression that doesn't really help a lot, but they do not kind of their target specification is moving. So given their time frame, it's it's a difficult thing. Yep, and that's out in the wild and probably being deployed to smartphones as we speak.
Yeah, so I just copied over the content of one of the example certificates here, and the fun part is that in the certificate there is a piece of JSON that is actually the claim, but this JSON is converted to CBOR before it is being processed. So we take a JSON document that everybody can be comfortable with and turn it into the CBOR content that goes into a CBOR web token under the claim -260. That's registered already, so it's in the INA registration. And so everybody who sees this CWT knows what the claim actually is about. It's about this health certificate thing. And so we have one JSON to CBOR conversion. Then we pack the CBOR into a CWT and then into COSI. We sign it with ECDSA, by the way. And the whole thing leads to a piece of COSI that is then run through zlib, and usually doesn't get smaller by that, which is really interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, but I looked at the examples, and they are usually like 700 bytes or so, and they are 700 bytes before the compression and 700 bytes after the compression, whatever. And then the result of the zlib compression goes into a base 45 encoding to turn it into a QR code. And well, base 45 is not so bright because it one of the characters it generates is a % sign, and the other characters is a space. So you really have to be careful with these base 45 encoded strings, and there are some QR code implementations that decode % encoding for you, so that % sign is going to mess up. So yeah, that's one place where just the packaging is not so bright. But anyway, so this turns into a QR code, into text for a QR code. But to make sure that this text is not misinterpreted, they also add the prefix HC1 : in front of that, so it looks like a URI to those people who interpret QR codes as URIs, and so it doesn't land in any unrelated application, but it lands in the application that knows what HC1 is. So that's a kind of armor against misinterpretation. And that's ultimately what gets encoded into the QR code that you get on your piece of paper with a digital green certificate on it. So I think we can learn quite a bit from here. First of all, that it's nice that we have a defined JSON to CBOR conversion in 8949. That was work that was well invested. Then we have good ways of actually defining signed statements in CWT, because we can just allocate a claim number -260 in this case. Yeah, then we are done with the products of the IETF, and then again we go into zlib compression and base 45, and so having a standard interface to QR code would be a nice thing, and I think Michael has been working on something like that before as well. So Michael, if you have an opinion on that, I would like to hear it. Oh, Michael is only here in Jabber? Okay.
Yeah, that list is a bit confusing. But I fully agree that having something, some kind of more or less default way of encoding COSI into a QR code would be useful. And especially given that then we could use self-describing CBOR to kind of dispatch it even further, although I don't know how well this can, it might make sense to pick a conversion that allows this mapping of that allows a self-describing CBOR thing that is a tagged entity to easily go on through the dispatch mechanisms that are usually in place with for QR codes. There was and are there more things where we as a CBOR community could have provided them with better input to get started? One thing I did notice is that there's a lot of not of date times in ISO format in there, which could just as well be expressed with the tags. That probably doesn't fly because of their internal use of JSON, right?
Yeah, the JSON CBOR conversion would have to be schema informed to handle that, and they probably didn't want to do that.
Yeah. One thought that was around in their processes, because I looked a bit through them, was that once there is setlib compression, the string date and times might even be more compact than the other than the numeric ones, the epoch-based ones, because they can compress away, because then it's more accessible to setlib what there is in common.
Yeah, except that zlib lives from repetition. And there is very little repetition here. So zlib really, or the deflate algorithm actually that is underlying that, really cannot do very much. And even the last name Musterfrau here, for instance, that is once in uppercase and once in lowercase, and zlib cannot make any use of that redundancy. Or the last name Gössinger, that is in an ASCII transliteration once, and in \u Unicode characters otherwise. So there's really
why it would just be UTF-8, but still.
No.
Yes. It's a text string, and the JSON representation places it in, makes those use things out of it, but it's a text string on the wire, right? I think.
Yeah, but the fun thing is that the okay, I have to check that, but maybe it's actually, maybe you're right.
But still, you can't compress across these. So my certificate at least had a kind of valid from and valid to component in there, and that was encoded in date times, and those would be partially redundant, but it's like 8 bytes, so not sure how much of that would really be compressed away.
Yeah, here you can see both ISO 8601 date and POSIX date. Both are present.
Yeah.
So the 162 and so on, that's POSIX date, and the other ones, of course, are 8601 dates. Anyway, so yeah, I think what I learned from this episode is that we haven't really covered our base on the way how does a CBOR data structure get useful in the QR code world, and we probably should have addressed that. And by the way, there is a draft out there with that base 45 encoding that I actually originally commented on, that the character set is not so brightly chosen. But of course, it's the character set that QR code supports. So for some reason that is opaque to me, they decided that they have to use all these characters, which they don't, because base 41 is enough. And so they could have left 4 of these characters unused. Anyway, so this is the kind of integration problem that you get when you put CBOR into QR code.
So for this particular deployment, my understanding is that they won't change anything about their base encoding because they have a deadline like in 2 weeks. But given that if that document progresses and or we want to do something to give a default encoding for CBOR for QR codes, then that could still be using something base 41-ish or even base 32 if the point can be made that the other thing is just too complicated, and that's good enough as well. And I think that would be a good thing to have. The question is, do we have energy in the working group to take it on? To create what would that be? Kind of a best practices in using CBOR.
Well, it probably would be a document that specifically addresses the QR code community. And I know that Michael has done a lot of work there, so I was delighted to see his name in the attendee list, but he's only there using Jabber, so.
Yeah, but then that would be a good point to get him involved in the ensuing mailing lists discussion. And yeah, see where we get from there.
So that's all I had on this one.
So what I found out about this, I think I've covered as well. So with some time left, any more comments, voices, opinions, unrelated news?
This is Emil here. I have a question for Karsten concerning the maps, if you have time. If not, I can ask you by email.
I have some 11 more minutes.
You had suggested that the various compression schemes would have different tags. So would that tag be stacked on top of the tag that indicates that this is a multi-map? Or would there be several multi-map tags for the various compression schemes?
So given that we're talking about 1+1 tags right now, having stacked tags would take 4 bytes, and allocating a 1+2 tag for the combination would be 3 bytes. So I think we are better off not going for the stacked approach. But of course, maybe there is a reason to have a 1+1 tag just for the packing scheme, which is different from what we are discussing in the map-like data draft. So I don't have a complete answer for that, but I think that generally we would prefer just allocating more tags than from a larger space over stacking them, unless we really have a situation where you mix and match very freely. So it's not it's better to have the full cross product of both.
I understand. The problem is the bits that define the various traits might no longer align nicely. But
well, if you
personally, oh, go ahead.
If you add bits that actually are in the second byte, so you just use the existing tag numbers and add bits for the actual packing scheme in the second byte, then you might be able to come up with a scheme that works nicely.
Bits in the second byte. I don't follow.
So the tags we have now essentially fill bits in a single byte. So they come off the 1+1 tag space. And if we go into the 1+2 tag space, then we have another byte. And that byte we can fill with additional bits, which need to, the byte needs to be different from 0. So we actually are in the 1+2 tag space. But otherwise, we can use that whole byte for allocating further bits.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
If we go that direction, I suggest we try to keep the allocated tags compact in the sense that they kind of all significant bits go to the end, because otherwise we'd create a situation where the tag number space is fragmented by different things allocating different hyperrectangles in different bit alignments, and these might at some point get messy. So just kind of be sure that we have an easy to be compatible with allocation scheme.
I know personally, I don't really care if the bits align nicely with the various traits, because let's say there are, I don't know, 20 tags total for the maps. In my implementation, I can just build a lookup table. Just subtract the tag number from the first tag, and that becomes the entry in my lookup table where I have all my traits. Where, tag 1, 2, 3, well, it's a multi-map with, and so on. So I'm personally not worried about the bits being nicely lined up with the traits. I don't know about others though, but.
Yeah, maybe we can take this offline, because once we know what additional bits we want to have, we can try to come up with a scheme that actually fulfills what Christian was talking about.
Yep.
Okay. Then thanks everyone. I think that's all for today. And see you on the mailing list, and in 2 weeks here again on MeetEcho, because I think this worked out pretty fine. And I'll stick around for a bit of testing of screen sharing and video if anyone wants to do more tryout. That could be done in the next few minutes. To the others, thank you, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
So if anyone still wants to stick around the video and maybe even try to share some things.
I wouldn't mind trying to share a screen.
Yep, go ahead. Ah, okay, granting.
It's I have to give it permission.
Yeah, that's always the stumbling block. That's why it's good to try that beforehand.
So
Yes.
I'm sharing the meeting minutes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
If
now I gotta unshare.
Can you leave that on for a moment? I'm just
Sure.
curious. Oh, okay. All slots for requested media are taken, so I'll have to kick you out of screen sharing, or you have to close it.
Okay, you're gonna kick me out?
Yep. And now I can pick a screen to share. Could someone else turn on video?
I
I don't
can't.
have a camera connected.
Okay. But at least things like we can have at least we can have at most one person sharing screen, which is okay-ish, and probably, I mean, video works for different participants in regular Meet Echo use that we've had earlier. So, yep, looks good to me. Okay then, I'll be off. See you.
See you. Goodbye.